in our bicentenary year, we're delighted to have a talk about the distinguished Bath collector of art and objets d'art, Sir William Holburne, whose collection after his death went on to form the core of the Holburne Museum. To tell us about him is Hannah Mills, an art historian specialising in the Victorian era with a particular interest on one of Sir William's contemporaries, the painter and sculptor Sir Frederick Leighton. Hannah was on the staff of English Heritage before she joined the Holburne Museum 3.5 years ago, where she is currently the Assistant Curator. Now, in 1824, when this institution was being founded, Sir William set out on his grand tour of Europe to see the cultural sites which clearly had an enormous influence on him. It means that he missed our inaugural lecture and the dinner in January 1825, but our records show that he was quite fond of us. He made a number of gifts to our collection of historic objects when the institution was effectively the Bath City Museum, so we seem to have had his active support. And let me hand over to Hannah now to tell you much more about William Holburne, A Life in Objects.
Hello, can you all hear me? Fab. God, there's so many of you. So yes, William Holburne. When I was asked to give a talk on William Holburne, I was thinking long and hard about what I should do. And of course, it's his objects that are the things that we most remember him by, and are the things that really speak to us now about who he was and who he might have been and sort of who we think he is. And so his life can really be tracked by the objects that he collected and that I'm very privileged to help look after. So this is the man himself. So before I dive into Holburne, I'm just going to very quickly talk about the building we're in today, which is the Holburne Museum, which if any of you are Bridgerton fans will know as Lady Danbury's house. So he never actually lived at the Holburne Museum. I do say this because we do get a lot of people that come into the museum thinking he lived there. It was never a house. So it opened in the 1790s. It originally was meant to be a two-storey building by Thomas Baldwin. He then went bankrupt, and so Charles Harcourt Masters took over the design, and we ended up with this lovely building. And then it starts off as the entrance to the pleasure gardens. Then it becomes a private lodging house, a school, and then before coming to us and being the Holburne Museum. And having the wonderful Sir Reginald Bloomfield adding lots to it, including the flaming urns at the top. That was his design. But prior to us coming to the Holburne Museum, or Sydney Hotel, and opening in 1916, we were at the Savings Bank in Charlotte Street, and that was the original Holburne Museum of Menstrie. There, it was a little bit more cramped, and from photographs that the very few that we have, it has beautiful old cases, which we have a few of them in our stores that we're slowly migrating at the moment. But yeah, it was quite an interesting place. So I wanted to start off with the family Bible. The reason being is that myself and my colleague Nick made quite an interesting discovery a couple of weeks ago. So if any of you follow the Holburne Museum on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you'll see every year we put out Sir William Holburne's birthday. And we put it out on the 21st of August. Happy birthday, Sir William Holburne. We thought nothing of it. It was in the diary. None of us had clocked anything. And then myself and Nick decided we'd had this in the diary for weeks. We thought, oh, we'll get the family Bible out and go through it. And that was on the 23rd of August. So we pulled the lovely family Bible out and open it and go, oh, that's different. And so if I switch along, you can see that doesn't say the 21st. That says the 23rd of August. So there was a frantic of us all in the office going, what? We've been celebrating his birthday wrong for ages. So I ring up my mum, who's a historian, and go, get on Ancestry now. Find us any record of where he was. Like, what's his birthday? And yeah, somebody at some point in our Google Calendar at work had switched Holburne's birthday. But what I think is really quite freaky is we put this in the diary for weeks, that we were going to do it on the 23rd of August. And we opened the book up on the 23rd of August. So it's almost like Holburne was telling us, no, I want you to get my birthday correct this year. And the fact that it's the centenary year of him taking his grand tour as well, I do think it's, quite kind of fortuitous, should we say. I do feel sorry for his mother though, because he was born at 1 o'clock in the morning. So, but the Holburne Family Bible is something, it's quite battered now, but it's a really beautiful piece, and it lists his parents and then the 7 Holburne siblings. There were 7 in total, and I'll get into them more in a minute. And then tucked inside are various, there was a piece of paper which sort of details everybody's marriages and how they were all connected. So it's quite a nice piece for us to have. So we have the Holburne family here. So the picture on the screen, so that's Sir Francis and Lady Alicia Holburne. So that's Holburne's parents. And if you have a look on this great Holburne family tree, I didn't make this. This was luckily given to us. You can see the 7 siblings along there. And if we go up one, you've got Francis and Alicia. And you have Catherine Holburne, who then becomes Catherine Cousins. And then above them, you've got Francis Holburne, who marries Frances Lascelles. There is a lot of Francises in that family. It gets very confusing when you're talking about Francises. But it's through the Francis Holburne and Frances Lascelles that we have our connections to the slave trade. So our Plantation Day book comes down from the Ball family. It's also from Catherine Cousins that Holburne gets his an inheritance from. And my colleague Nick's been doing some more research into the family and has recently sort of been looking into, so when Thomas Cousins died, he left £1,500 per year to Catherine. And then then she gave the money to the Holburne siblings after her death. But also Jemima, who was Thomas Cousins' niece, left William Holburne £500 and some money for his sisters as well. So that's where quite a lot of the family wealth comes from. So the Holburne siblings, so I mentioned there's 7, but 5 survive past childhood. So incidentally, they have 2 Francises. So you've got Francis Ralph, and then you have Francis Samuel, who dies in infancy later on. But you've got Francis Alicia, Edward, who dies in infancy, Catherine, Thomas William Holburne, although we quite often call him William, and he seems to have gone by that with his family and in letters, Francis Samuel, and then Mary Ann Barbara. And the sword that's on screen, it belonged to Francis Ralph. So Francis Ralph, his older brother, very sadly died. So they came from a naval family, but Francis goes into the army, and he is a captain in the 3rd Regiment of Foot Guards in the Napoleonic Wars, and fought at the Battle of Bayonne. And in April 1814, he sustained a musket ball to the foot and died of tetanus. Now, it's said that when he was lying on the battlefield, he specified that his sword and sash were to be sent to my brother. Tragically, the Battle of Bayonne took place 3 days after Napoleon had abdicated, so it really wasn't any use. So his older brother died for really nothing, but it profoundly affected Thomas William, the death of his brother. And he talks quite openly and writes about what a loss his brother was, calling him a treasure. So it did greatly affect the family. But we do have the sword on display in our Posnet gallery, if you do come to the museum. So we have the man himself. So this is him in his younger years. So this is a beautiful miniature that we have that's on ivory. And it really sort of shows Holburne as a little bit cheeky. I think he's kind of got a sort of a cheeky smile to him, which we see later on in life with the lovely photograph that we have towards his latter years. And we have his 2 medals here. So we have his Trafalgar Medal because he joined the Navy in July 1805 at the age of 11. And then by the time that he saw action in the Battle of Trafalgar, he was about 12 years old. So very, very young. And he was on HMS Orion. And then following services, he ended up at the blockade of Toulon in 1806, the West Indies in 1808, and he was also in the notorious fever-ridden Brazil station from 1810 to 12, and then back in the Mediterranean and then the English Channel before finally coming home in 1815 on half pay. So already you can see, though he's got this cheeky smile, if you're in the Navy seeing really horrific battles at that age, it's going to have a profound effect on you from the age of 11 or 12. And it is really remarkable that he survived into adulthood because of what he saw. And also the fact, infant mortality in those days as well. So we're very, very lucky that he survived. And the Trafalgar Medal that's on that side, we do have on display at the museum. This one is currently in storage at the moment just because of the ribbon and light levels, but we will be getting it out again soon. We have to let objects rest every now and again because of light levels. So Mary Ann Barbara. So we owe a lot to Mary Ann Barbara because, quite frankly, when I talk about his objects later on and what he left on his deathbed, I wouldn't have been surprised if she just went, I'm washing my hands of this and I'm selling it all, because he left a lot of things. But she had the foresight to keep all of his collection and to bequeath it to the people of Bath, and a trust was formed to look after it. She wanted to give it more to the council, kind of to be a sort of a civic museum. They turned their nose up at it. So that's why we have the Holburne Museum as kind of an independent trust in Bath. And she died in 1882, and then by 1893, the premises in Charlotte Street, just off of Queen Square, so right around the corner from here, were able to accommodate some of it. And it was over 20 years until the money left by Catherine Cousins, because they still had about £1,100 of it left that they could then buy the Sydney Hotel and turn it into the Holburne Museum that we have today. So we owe Mary Ann Barbara a lot. Incidentally, Mary Ann Barbara and Thomas William, towards the end of their lives, weren't the greatest of friends. Although they lived in the same house together, they appear to have written letters to each other. And she was quite disapproving of the things he bought, particularly the alcohol, which we'll talk about in a bit. And his collecting habits. But she does look like quite a formidable woman. I definitely wouldn't cross her. She's... but we owe her a lot. So this is the first house that the Holburne family take, and this was taken by his parents in 1802, and it was quite a popular place, Bath, by that point for naval families. And because his father had been in the Navy, he was destined towards the Navy. His brother was destined towards the Army. Though Bath was not as fashionable with the kind of the season anymore, it was still a place that you found artists, had a thriving art trade, and there was lots of life going on here. And it's also where, if you were a young man or anybody that wanted to be a collector, you could be exposed to the collecting scene. There was lots of auction houses here, there was lots of sales, and there was other collectors operating in Bath. So it's possible that this is one of the places that he started to get his collecting bug from. Incidentally, he also is, so his cousins are the Lassells at Harewood House, and the Holburne family did regularly go and visit them. And we know that Edward Lascelles was a patron of Turner and commissioned Turner to paint the beautiful pictures of Harewood House. And we know that Holburne would have seen these. So it's also from there that we think he started to get his collecting bug from. So it's kind of a combination of lots of different things. So this is the house here, and they stayed until 1829. So his parents died, his father in 1820, his mother in 1829, and then they moved subsequently after that. So we have William Holburne's passport, and this is where things get really, really interesting. So Holburne takes on his grand tour between January and December 1824. Now, what you've got to remember about William Holburne is he didn't have the same upbringing as other collectors like William Beckford, who we all know from Bath, and other people. He grew up pretty much in the Navy. That's where he had his early years. His family didn't have a great collection of things. They had a couple of family portraits. They had some Oriental porcelain and some books. But other than that, they didn't have a great lot of things. He hadn't had that classical education that other collectors of this period get. And so we know that before he undertook his grand tour at the age of 31, which was quite late, because most people going on a grand tour, it's in their teenage years. It's kind of the equivalent of the gap year today. He reads up. So he buys an awful lot of books and he sort of gens up on what he can do. But what we also know is he doesn't go with a tutor. He doesn't go with a regular tour guide. He pretty much looks up what public transport there is in each country, how we can get across, and pretty much plans his own routes and looks for what he can find. And we also know that he really liked Italy because he keeps going back to Rome. And he has reasonable funds at his disposal at this point. So both his parents have died. He's inherited the wealth because his older brother's died. So he was the second son, but he's now got the money. And he sets off on, it's in total an 18th month tour, but he does take Christmas off to come home and see his family. But he tours Italy, coming to Rome a few times. And then, there we go. So he's in Rome. We know that he was on the 15th of June, 1824. He was in Milan, because he had this lovely pencil portrait drawn of him. So we can date him exactly to there. From there, he also went on to Switzerland, Austria, Germany, the Low Countries, particularly liked Amsterdam. And then he is collecting lots of small items. And lots of brightly coloured, beautiful things is what we're finding from what he's collecting. He also, while he's on his travels, has some sketchbooks, and he has his own go at drawing classical architecture. I mentioned that from the documents that we do have, now I say this scarcely because quite a lot of the Holburne documents we don't have anymore. They were burnt after his death. So we have a few scanned pieces, but we don't have a lot of information. And he was particularly taken with classical Roman architecture and particularly sculptures. So this is our Small Wonders cabinet at the museum. Who's been to the Holburne Museum? I mean, I know quite a lot of you are volunteers and staff at the Holburne in the audience, so I would expect you to be there. But I think if you haven't been, please come and please go to the Posnick Gallery because you can see quite a lot of the Small Wonders pieces. So we have lovely plaques, we've got fans, we've got things that he collected on his tours that were portable, that he could get in his suitcase or his travelling trunks as he was moving around, because he doesn't have a whole load of people with him. He's pretty much kind of the equivalent of backpacking now is what he's doing, if you want to sort of in layman's terms. This is one of the pieces that we know definitively, because we don't know everything that he picked up on the Grand Tour. We know definitively that he picked this piece up. We know because he definitely would have seen the original. And he was very, very fascinated by Roman mythology and Roman stories because he keeps going back to it in what he's collecting. So it's the wolf with the twins at the capital, so it's Romulus and Remus. It is probably 19th century. It's a copy of the early 16th century Italian piece in Etruscan bronze, and it's Romulus and Remus being suckled by a wolf. If any of you have seen the original, it's just on screen on the other side. It's on a column. And so think of, when we go abroad, we might pick up a postcard, or I've definitely, when I've been to Italy, I've picked up little kind of plaster models of the Colosseum and the Trevi Fountain and things. That's kind of his equivalent, but on a much grander scale. And you can see that in the museum as well. We have this one on display. The reason I say it greatly influenced him is because later on he picks up Eurydice and Orpheus. So these are a pair that we have, and these are quite special. So they date from about 1610. So they're antiques by the time that he gets them. And they're bronzes, Renaissance bronzes. And don't know if you're familiar with the story, but Apollo gave Orpheus a lyre and taught him how to play. So that's what Orpheus is holding on the corner. And it said that nothing could resist Orpheus's beautiful melodies, neither enemy nor beast. So Orpheus fell in love with Eurydice, a woman of beauty and grace, and they married and lived happily for a short time. However, this wasn't to last, and a prophecy meant that Eurydice was wandering through the forest with the nymphs. And it depends on various stories, but some say that she merely danced with the nymphs, other people that say that she went off and then was bitten by a snake and sadly died instantly. And Orpheus sang his grief from a lyre, and then nothing would move living or for him. And it was sort of his grief was him to play this lyre. There's some great books on Roman mythology, if I've whetted your appetite for this. But he collects these as well as many other pieces. He doesn't always get it right. We have a few 19th century copies that he picks up thinking that they're older. But Rome seems to be a really key point in his collecting journey. He clearly really liked it. We also have 3 copies of these beautiful pieces. So these are in a leather case. They're Italian polished Roman mosaic glass and gold from about 1825. So we know that it was in the latter part of his tour that he picked these up. And it's a bracelet with a cross and earrings in millefiori. So that's the little mosaic glass here. Any of you who've been to Rome, you'll see them sort of everywhere. And he picks up items for his 3 sisters. So he doesn't come back completely empty-handed, but it's quite a nice gift to come back with. And they're 22 karat gold. We have a few of them on display in the museum as well. They are 3 identical sets. So it's kind of as close to identical as he could get with these. We don't know exactly if the sisters wore them. We don't have any accounts, but I'm sure they would have done. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. But it also shows that while he's off having fun and spending this money and sort of enhancing his education, I think, as well as sort of having a jolly, he's also thinking about his family still as well, which is quite nice. I then move on to the Bruegels. So we know that Holburne was in the Low Countries, and he would have become quite familiar with Dutch art. Also, what you've got to bear in mind at this point, so from the sort of the 1600s, we've got a massive art trade with Holland. So we will have had Dutch paintings coming into Britain before the 19th century. You can read up lots of different accounts, particularly in the sort of 17th century, latter part of the 17th century, of dealers pretty much just getting as many pictures as they could in, because the craze for Dutch art over here was so big. But we're quite proud of our Bruegels. So smug moment here. We have the biggest collection in the UK, so we're quite proud of these. So these are all by Peter Bruegel the Younger. But Peter Bruegel the Younger was influenced by his father's work. So his father, normally known as Peter Bruegel the Elder, was the first of a real distinguished family of painters. And his son, Peter, who creates these, was known as Hell Bruegel because of his fascination with hobgoblins, fire, and grotesque figures. Now, I can't find a hobgoblin in any of ours, which I'm a bit upset about, because I think that'd be quite cool. You can, if you do come and see these or look quite close, you can see the figures are a little bit more grotesque than his father's, but quite a lot of the motifs he's copying. So with the visit to a farmhouse, which is in the centre, which I'll move, there we go, you can see it larger. He copies that from a large picture by his father. You can see that the local landowners, who are in the dark clothing there, are distinguished from the peasants, and they're coming to hand out charity to everybody there. So they're handing out coins and little gifts, probably a wrapped sugar cone, because that was quite an expensive piece then. And they're also visiting for the birth of the baby who's being nursed by the fire in the foreground. And then you've got robbing the bird's nest, and we definitely know that that was from a much larger piece that his father created. And it's so the central finger is pointing over his shoulder, a man clinging to a tree. So if you look at the top, who's attempting to rob a bird's nest, and he's demonstrating the proverb: "He who knows where the nest is has the knowledge. He who robs has the nest." And it's taken from a much larger painting, as I said, of his that his father created, of the peasant who's stumbling into a stream at that point. The Bruegels did like a little bit of humour with their pieces. And then probably the most famous one, we've got the wedding dance in the open air. It's in a clearing at the edge of the village. You've got the bride at the top with the little halo over her head, and everybody's having a bit of a boogie down at the bottom. Now, interestingly, one of my colleagues, Spencer, said he could never find the groom. And when I went to have a look earlier, I couldn't find the groom. I've never thought about this before. So if you do come to the Holburne and find the groom, do tell us, because we don't know where he's got to. And yeah, it was something I'd never noticed before. But we're not entirely sure when Holburne collected these, whether it was part of his grand tour or whether he picked these up later because of the sort of paintings that he was experiencing in the Low Countries. But they're quite cheeky. They're a bit of fun as well as being really fine works of art. And so it's, yeah, quite nice that he did collect these. We're very happy with them. So we move on to a copy of the Portland vase. And if you know the Holburne well, you know we have those fabulous hanging pots in the centre of the Posnick Gallery, and the Portland vase hangs down to the bottom. And it's one of my favourite objects. So I love ceramics. And so, sorry, I'm going to go full nerd right now on this one. So in 1786, Josiah Wedgwood started his project to create a copy of the Portland vase. And you can see here, it's one of the original advertising for when he had completed it. And this is our copy here. And so it took him until 1790. It was quite an undertaking. And it was 5 years of experiments and trials and testing. And the first editions of the vase were ready and launched to an exclusive group of subscribers. So it's jasperware clay with white model detail figures placed on a blue background, and it's to sort of emulate that glass effect that is with the original piece. While it's not exactly the same as the original vase, and I'll show you kind of side by side in a minute, there's a few stylistic differences. What Josiah does, which is so clever, is he gets the jasper clay to mimic glass in colour, so that I've got a picture of our one that we shined light through, and yeah, if you would think, oh, that does look very glass-like. So this is one of his plaster casts of the original vase. And what is quite incredible is, so those of you that know the original vase, it was one of probably the most famous objects to pass through Sir William Hamilton's hands. It then ends up at the Scottish dealer James Burns between 1780 and 1783. And then it ends up being sold to the Portland family, and that's why it becomes the Portland vase. Now, it has had several accidents over the years, and if I go back to this one, so for those, I know that you can't see the pointer on online. If you just look at the lady and look at her arm, you can see there's quite a sizable crack through it because it has broken into several pieces. But what's really interesting is that Josiah Wedgwood's copy is what they use to put it back together, because this is so good. So this is his cast that he creates. You can see all of these at the V&A's Wedgwood collection. They have everything. And then these are some of the casts that were taken from the original vase. And you've got the lady with her arm raised, the top. So these are the trial pieces that he did, and there was lots of bubbling in the kiln and gases from the clay, and it didn't quite work. And so you get some with quite bubbled, you get some where the white plaster that's over the top just peels off. So it did take him quite a while to get the surface right. But then you have the first edition copy, and then you've got various ones, and this is the most modern. You can now get one that is gold covered if you wanted it. They have a gold Portland vase. But this is our one here. So ours is a second edition, so it's not a first edition, but it is still beautiful, and it is one of my favourite pieces at the Holburne. And so you can see on screen, so ours is the one, if you're looking at it, to the left. And then you've got the original glass one, and you can see that there's a little bit of difference with the figures, but he's still got the columns, and then Patterson sat on the kind of the rock face with the stick. But there's a little bit of difference in the figure that's by the handle. So this is us about 2 years ago now, year and a half. So we took the central display down to give it a clean when we rehang all of our Dutch works. And you can see that it does almost look sort of glass-like in the way that he's created it. And don't worry, the pots hang very nicely. It doesn't damage them in any way. All of the weight is taken into the mechanism rather than on the necks. And there's me giving the Portland vase a clean, which was definitely a high point in my career, because I do love this piece. And that's a conservac there. So I'm now going to move on to some of our Maiolica. So we have the Diana and Actaeon plate, which, if you're familiar with the Holburne, you'll know lives in the ballroom. So as you come in through the doors, it's on the right. And it's a large dish intended for display rather than use. So it's not something you're going to eat your dinner off of. It's tinned glazed earthenware decorated with enamel colours. And what's really interesting about Maiolica is it shares quite a lot of the properties of lustre. So lustre is something that I absolutely love, and lustre is that really kind of sparkly pot. Think William de Morgan, that kind of thing. And so they have quite a lot of similarities in the different materials that's used. Lustre is just fired at a slightly higher point. But the middle section, and then you've got the protruding foot, and then there's the coloured decorations. So you've got cobalt blue in there, you've got orange yellows, lemon yellow, bright green, opaque dark red, and the back of it is partly glazed, but not completely. And then there's a clear glaze that kind of has a pinkish hue to it that's over the top. And then you've got in the bath, you've got Diana and her attendants around her, and they're in the bath. And then Actaeon is already partly transformed into a stag, and he's being, so you can see there, he's got half of his body. So for those of you who can't see my pointer, look to the stag, half of his body, his sort of front half, he's half stag, and then his legs at the back are still human. And for those of you that don't know the myth of Diana and Actaeon, so it can be found in Ovid Metamorphoses. And the tale recounts the fate of a young hunter named Actaeon, who was the grandson of Cadamus, who was, and it's his encounter with Artemis and the Roman goddess Diana of the hunt. So she's in the nude, she's bathing, and he springs upon her, and the nymphs all start to scream in surprise in an attempt to cover up Diana, although they're not really trying there. And then he's transformed into a deer because of Diana's fury. And as he attempts to get away and flee, several hounds hunt him down and tear him to pieces. So it's a very jolly story. But we know that William Holburne really liked it. And so this is, the little section on the side is from Schaeffer's, which is kind of our first catalogue, really, other than the 1860s one, which Holburne had produced himself. We have here a fine platter of Diana in the bath, surprised by Actaeon on the border, a fight between the centaurs, and then it's got its dimensions. And so you have the centaurs around the edge. Yeah, it's just a really, really beautiful piece. It's about yay big, and seeing it in the flesh, this picture doesn't do it justice, but in the flesh, the colours just sing. It really sort of comes to life. And we know that Holburne, in his house, had this displayed quite prominently. So we move on to 10 Cavendish Crescent. So this is where William Holburne and his sisters move after the death of his mother. So they moved there in 1830. And I have here the 1871 census, and where the little arrow is pointing is where William Holburne is, and it says he's the head of the house. Just there, and this is him and his sisters and servants on there. And part of the move was to display quite a lot of his collection. I'm hoping, there we go. So this central display that we have in the Posnick Gallery is what we imagine his house to be like. And the reason I say this is because I have in my possession the rather wonderful account of what he had in his house after his death. This is it. It's pages and pages and pages. And what I think is quite incredible is in his bedroom, he has 21 plates and dishes, 16 Wedgwood vases, a gilded Wedgwood plaque, sundry Wedgwood pedestals, lots of different cups and saucers, and various other pieces. I was talking to our head of exhibitions about this, Nina, earlier. She went, how did he move around in there? It was just full of objects. And so this is what we think their drawing room would have looked like. But Holburne is a collector, so it's really after he comes back from the grand tour. And it's really when he moves house that he can sort of spread out and collect more. And so we have, so on the far left of the screen, you've got a account of the pieces that he sent to the Leeds National Exhibition in the 1860s. And that was kind of modelling Crystal Palace, the Great Exhibition in 1851, but it was sort of a Leeds equivalent at the infirmary. And Holburne sends a lot of pieces. He sends a lot of silverware, a lot of ceramics, paintings, including a Leonardo da Vinci, which we will talk about in a minute, and several other pieces as well that he sends. And we also have some books. So we have an Edward Lascelles book that we know because the Lascelles had a profound effect on him as a collector. And he also has one of Thomas Cousin's books as well. And we know that when he first got some money from Catherine Cousins, he did use some of it to buy some of her collection, which we do also think this book would have come from as well. So it really shapes his way as a collector, his kind of formative years with his family, his sort of extended family, and then his time in Bath. So we move on to the Leonardo da Vinci, and there is a very strong question mark on this one. So we don't actually have a Leonardo da Vinci at the museum, which if any of you have come to visit us, you'll know that we don't have a Leonardo da Vinci. It was sold to Holburne as a Leonardo da Vinci. To be fair, it's not the worst I've seen. It's not the best either, but it's not the worst. And in the catalogue of 1867, it would have hung in the front drawing room in a mahogany case. And it was put as Leonardo da Vinci, and he does send it to Leeds. And you can see, so for those of you not with the pointer, it's the fifth line down. You've got a, sixth line down, you've got a female head, and then it says Sir T.W. Holburne, Bart. And so it's under the Da Vinci line. So it was thought of being a Da Vinci, and he really prized this piece and showed it off in his drawing room. Now, since then, we have seen that it's not actually a Da Vinci. It is Italian, so there's that to it, and it is old, but it's not from the family. But we do believe that he paid probably about £50 for it. So that's an awful lot of money for a Da Vinci, and to get that wrong is quite bad as well. And so it was later downgraded, but not before Hugh Blaker, who was one of our first curators. You might have heard the name from the Isleworth Mona Lisa. So he believed it was a Da Vinci, which does kind of make me think, okay, you're meant to be a Da Vinci sort of expert, and you thought that this was, but it's kind of an interesting nugget in our history. So we also have the 1851 London book and its vicinities. So this was produced in 1851 for anyone going to the Great Exhibition that maybe didn't live in London and wanted to also see the sites where they were down here. And so we have this beautiful book that we know Holburne had. We know that Holburne probably went to the Great Exhibition because we have some of the catalogues that were produced for the different gallery spaces and areas in the Great Exhibition as well. And so we have this lovely book with our lovely L301 mark there. And this is the beautiful map that's in the back that we got out yesterday and had a look at. And you can see it's not been used very much, so he wasn't kind of using it as an A to Z for the map, but the book itself is quite used. So we know that Holburne did really use his library. They weren't decorative. He was really using them. And so I thought I would show you this because it's just quite nice to see from the library. And then we have our Casales, which if you all look to your right now, you can see our lovely Casales have migrated. You know, it's a very Blue Peter moment, something I prepared earlier. I did actually bring them here, so it was quite nice. But we have our Casales, so they normally live on our stairs at the Holburne. And we've brought them here. So we have spring and summer. And weirdly enough, summer in the Schaefer's catalogue and in the early Holburne catalogue that he created was listed as autumn, which when we were doing some research on it, we were going, we don't have autumn. So But then if you look at summer, it does have an autumnal vibe to it a little bit. But originally, we think it would have been part of a set of 4. So you would have had the 4 seasons. And we know that he bought them off of William Beckford. So Alderman Beckford had commissioned quite a lot of Casales. Do have a listen to Dr. Amy Frost's talk on Casale. I think BRLSI are going to be putting it out eventually on YouTube. Am I right, David? Yeah. Do look at it, because she knows much more on, she looks after Beckford's Tower and is much more of a Casale expert than I am. But so, and she does talk about our Casales in this. But you can see here you've got the sheaves. So this is summer, and then you have spring with the beautiful flowers. And Casale was born in Rome in 1705, and Casale seems to be a very popular artist in Bath. There's also some Casales, incidentally, in the ceiling as well at the moment, if you want to gaze up. And there seems to be quite a lot of sales of Casales in the early 19th century, particularly when William Beckford sells his. What's really interesting is, so there's a bit of debate as to whether our Casales are related to the Temple Newsome Casale. This is autumn, and it goes back and forth. So we have been told that it is part of the same set, and then there's thoughts that it maybe isn't. So we're not entirely sure, and we'd love to do some more research into this. But weirdly enough, exactly about a year and a bit before I came to the Holburne Museum, I was giving a lecture under that Casale, and now I'm near the other one, so it's quite weird. But we don't know where winter is. So winter, we don't know where that's gone. It doesn't appear to be in any museums in the UK. I was doing some more research earlier just to see if anything had popped up, and we can't seem to find it anywhere. So if you've got it in your attic, do let us know. But we know that Holburne really loved the Casales, and they were displayed prominently in his house as well. And it's that same Roman connection again. He keeps coming back to Rome. It just seems to be sort of a sticking point for him for his collecting. Now, we have a lot of spoons at the Holburne Museum. William Holburne loved a spoon. We don't quite know why he loved a spoon, but we have hundreds of the blooming things. We've got spoons for every occasion, including what I like to affectionately call the Swiss Army knife of spoons. So this is a folding spoon with a detachable oval bowl that's got a relief of St. Michael behind the 2 prongs. So you take off the spoon point, you've got a fork in there, 2-pronged fork. There's also a pen, should you need to do some writing while you're eating. There would have also been a toothpick and an ear scoop. So yeah, just what you want with your dinner. But it's by Frederick Hillebrandt from Nuremberg, and it's silver gilt, circa 1595. And if you Google him, you'll see he creates some other kind of metamorphic pieces. One of them's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And that's also silver gilt. It's more of an ewer with, but it comes apart and does various things. And so he seems to be the master of kind of transforming pieces. But we have this on display. And knowing that Sir William Holburne loved spoons, I'm not surprised that he bought this one. Okay, we don't exactly know when he bought this one, but it does seem to be a piece that he really liked. Whether he used it, I don't know. But it is quite a prominent one. But he did run into some difficulties with spoons. So there's been an urban legend at the Holburne Museum for ages that Holburne got into a fight over a spoon. And I couldn't find any sort of mention of it anywhere. And then one of our ex-curators who was with us this week finally showed me exactly where I can find the information. And so what we have here, you can probably see it better on the screen. But essentially, the trouble arose over some apostle spoons, which Holburne wanted to buy, but which Walker succeeded in acquiring. Holburne was so incensed that he called the other a thief, for which he received a blow in the face, which caused him to lose a quantity of blood, besides doing a damage in the shop to the extent of a good many pounds. Patterson, who is one of William Holburne's servants, is said to have been the one who helped to remove the marks of the battle from Sir William's face. Later, Paddington was in the service of then Bishop of Bath and Wells, and eventually of a lady at the Royal Crescent. But his spoon activities did cause him to get into a bit of a fracas. And so we have accounts of this in several newspapers of the lengths Holburne went to acquire a spoon. Now, we have so many apostle spoons. We've got them coming out of our ears. We have a whole section for apostle spoons, and this is one of them here. So it's the spoon on screen. Yes. It's notes. It's of the sort of 1500s, 1600s, and it's marked for William Simpson was the maker in London, it's marked with a mysterious touch of an unknown silversmith. It was said to have until somebody found the mark, but he's said to have been a silversmith to Henry VIII later on, and it's silver. And it's got a BH in hexagonal BH on it as well. And there's also fine touches of gilding on there, so we believe it would have been a gilded spoon as well. But we do have some very fine gold examples, silver and gilded versions as well, should you really like spoons. I was reading a great thing on the different types of spoons the other day, because we have to know these things, because he blooming loved a spoon. But then some of my favourite objects, and I did recently acquire one of these for myself because I just think they're truly fabulous. So they're cabinet cups, but they're affectionately known by myself and several of our collection volunteers as feet cups. So if you look really closely, they have little feet on them. They're just so cute. But they're by Crown Derby, they're English, circa 1800. And they're porcelain. Now the gold ones that have the beautiful relief moulding on, the little blue flowers, they're just gorgeous. And they have lizard feet on them, and looped handles with little lizards on them as well. And blue flowers in a biscuit mold. So biscuit is kind of a sort of a coarser porcelain ceramic kind of material. And they're in an arabesque design. And they have the little D on the bottom, and they're just so cute. And then we also have a pair, although sadly at some point in its life, the other one to the black and gold piece has had a slight accident with one of its arms. And it's decorated with black enamelled and then gilding. And it's got scrolls and loops and the same lizards on the side and little feet. And it's got urns and altars and insects and gilt. And it's little wonder that Holburne went down that, because it's very sort of ancient Rome sort of evokes on this one. We have quite a lot. So we have two sets like this with the little cabinet cups and then the little vase in the middle. And then we have some tiny little bowls with little feet as well. They are just gorgeous. Do have a look on our Instagram, because my colleague Sophie, who's our head of marketing and media, she posted some of these earlier. But this is from Schaefer's. So we have a pair of two-handled cups and a spill vase with blue flowers, relief on gold ground and two saucers. And then you have a pair of two-handled cups and saucers with spill vases, emblem of brown ground and saucers painted with flowers. And then it carries on with all the others. But they are just so gorgeous. And they have a sort of a shine to them. And as one of my younger volunteers said, very Bridgerton, when we were looking at them. Apparently the Featheringtons would have had the blue ones, but they're just so gorgeous. And we know that Holburne really liked Crown Derby, because we've got quite a lot of it, the pieces. And what's amazing about Holburne is he collects quite a lot of examples of ceramics. So we, until recently, because we're moving our stalls to create new galleries in the basement, we had a whole room for ceramics and glass. It was my favourite place to hang out down there. But he had examples of all the different makers. He was born in Swansea, so we had quite a lot of Nangari ware, which is just gorgeous. And we had Chelsea, we've got Serve, Crown Derby, just all of the pieces. And he was clearly obsessed with his collecting, to the point where he wanted to have something of everything. And these kind of show, because he collects the whole set when he's buying these. Again, sadly, we don't know when he bought them, which is sad. And then we move towards the sort of the end with the first photo that I showed you. And so this is probably one of, if you come to the Holburne, one of our sort of more famous pictures. And he's there with time clipping the wings of love. And it's a Chelsea Derby porcelain factory, soft paste porcelain figure from 1775. And it shows time clipping Cupid's wings. So love being sort of thwarted by time. And you've got old Father Time there clipping the wings. You have the struggling Cupid, and you have just at the bottom, you've got an hourglass. Now, the fact that Holburne's depicted with this, it's the piece closest to him, shows that it really must have been one of his favourite pieces. And we know that it had quite a prominent place in his house when he lived. It's mentioned on the inventory, it's mentioned in Schaeffer's. It's quite a prominent piece to him. I don't know why. We don't have any sort of record as to why it was one of his favourite pieces. We can surmise. But you can see from the colours, it is truly beautiful. And just a really, really wonderful piece. Now, I did say to you that we were going to have a sort of I was going to tell you a little bit more about what was in Holburne's collection, including quite a sizable alcohol collection of 212 bottles of sherry and 180 bottles of claret, which he doesn't appear to have with him here, but it's quite interesting that those are listed, that he has as this. So in terms of what we're doing at the Holburne at the moment, in terms of further research, because we would love to know more about Holburne in the collection, that's Harewood House. So we know that there are Holburne letters there. And so myself and my colleague Eleanor would like to go and have a look at some of those letters to shed more light on the family, the Lascelles family, the Holburnes, the connection between the two, and just to see if we can find out more about any of the siblings and William. And then we're also building on the work that's already been done in our plantation daybook, because we want to find out more about the Holburne's links to the legacies of slavery. And incidentally, if any of you are very interested in this, please come along the second week of October to the Holburne Museum. There'll be more information on our website soon, but we're going to be doing pop-up talks for Black History Month around the plantation daybook. So do look out for those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That was terrific. And it's really fascinating to connect some of the things that are on display with Sir William, even though very sadly, the records that show when things were bought have been destroyed. Though I understand there are quite a lot of cab receipts in there.
Yeah, lots of cab receipts and lots of party receipts. And we do know from the letters that Mary Ann Barbara was most upset by her brother's partying and alcohol consumption, and didn't think that what he was buying was sort of a good use of the family money. So we do have that.
Well, maybe the fact that he left so much meant that he wasn't drinking it.
Indeed, quite possibly.
Anyway, I'd just like to read one comment from the chat. One of the online viewers has suggested that in the Bruegel wedding feast picture, maybe the chap in the gold jacket in the middle of the painting.
Right, let's go back. Sorry, everyone, if you feel sick by this, let's go back. Ooh, there we go. Right, gold
So, is
jacket.
there a chap in gold?
Ooh, gold, yes, drinking. Is that the one? Do we think? Yeah. Spencer, do you think that's the groom?
Anyway, so a colleague of mine from Pilsey, Dipali, thank you very much for the suggestion. If anybody has any questions for Hannah, she's very happy to take them. We would ask that you speak into a microphone so that people who are online know what you're on about. Anybody got any questions? Can we hear at the middle?
Yeah. Just interested with the ceramics. I know you've got some, sorry, my brain's gone, Japanese pieces
Yes.
in the gallery. And otherwise you've shown us Italian pieces, and I've seen Italian pieces, and you've got the English. Does he buy any other continental pieces? Oh, you mentioned Sèvres,
Yes.
Has he got a general interest in
Yeah, he's got a
ceramics? Yeah.
general interest in ceramics. We know that from the family, he did inherit some pieces of chinoiserie and other oriental pieces of ceramics. Quite a lot of our ceramics, while we had, so Holburne gave us 4,000, well, he left us just over 4,000 objects when he died, to become the kind of the core of our collection. And so of that, quite a lot are ceramic. Some of those are Japanese, Chinese, and some of those are European inspired pieces, shall we say. But then we also have later on in the latter part of the 19th century, we have more pieces given to us by local people in the city so there was one lady whose family were missionaries, and so we have a lot of pieces coming through her, bequests and other pieces. So it is kind of a mismatch, but yes, he was collecting a few pieces. And one of you can't see it on there, but one of the pieces, I can bring it up actually. Bear with a moment. Oh, so on the far left, sorry, I get my lefts and rights mixed up. On the far left, the piece from the catalogue that he's mentioning is a Japanese pot. So we do know that he did have some pieces. We don't have the dates of when he was collecting them or whether they were given to him through the family, but he definitely had a few pieces. But the core of our sort of collection is expanded later, but he did have some, yeah.
Are there any other questions in the room? Well, I think
Oh,
I'll just
David, I think
check.
yeah.
I'm quite conscious that the family, of course, is not just Holburne, but Holburne of Menstrie, which is still there as a village to the east of Stirling.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, was there any continuing family connection with Menstrie, or otherwise, when did the connection break, do you think?
So Holburne is the last of the BRLSI, of the Holburns, but in terms of the connection, I think with him, the direct connection kind of ends. But this is a big thing. So we're trying to do more research at the moment with Harewood on the family, because we don't have a lot of information passed to a degree of William Holburne, and even then we don't know vast swathes about his life. So that is one of the areas, I was looking at that earlier, weirdly enough, that we want to do some more work on, but definitely he was the last of the BRLSI. So whether that is that cut-off point, I can't say definitively, but I'm hoping as we do more research, we will know more of this going forward. I know it's not a complete answer, but I hope that tied you over for the moment.
any further questions? No? Well, that just goes to show what a comprehensive talk we've had. And I would like to just say again how grateful we are for Hannah putting this together. It's very special for us because not only was 1824 a big year in our life, but also a big year in Sir William Holburne's life. And he was a donor to us. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that he gave us seem to have disappeared after the Second World War. It was a sad time when our collection was taken out of this building and the Admiralty took it over, and some of the things never seem to have made it back. So we have some of his possessions in our collection, but not all the ones that are recorded in our records as having been given. So again, Hannah, we're really grateful and like to show our appreciation. Thank you very much.